So thank you very much for coming today at the Scan Stand. We're at BETT 2025. My name is Jodi Nelson-Tabor. I am the head of Final Pixel Academy. Final Pixel is a creative innovation and filmworks company. We specialize in in-camera VFX virtual production. We work across film, TV, games, music video, immersive, and we have our world builders team who built this amazing world behind us here. We're going to hang out in the city, and I'm hanging out with my friends here. We got Peter Bathurst, who is a senior lecturer in cinematography, and Fakhar Raza, lovingly Raza, lecturer in computing and PhD researcher in complex learning, both from the University of Greenwich. And today we continue our second day at BETT. We're talking about inducation, which is a word that I made up, that essentially is about how do we bring industry and education together to fill our skills gaps, solve challenges of converging technology, and the whole supply chain in between. So today we're going to talk about investing in virtual production, a guide for university decision makers. But that doesn't mean investing means only money or only people at the top. And I'm really excited to talk to you guys about what that means for you and the work that you're doing at Greenwich. So let's just start off with a quick introduction and tell us a little bit about what you do. Peter, I'll start with you.
So Peter Bathurst, Senior Lecturer in Cinematography, University of Greenwich. I come from a long background in the industry, but I've always been romantically attached to academia, and part of the reason that I got back into it was because I was interested with the relationship between the academy and the industry, and to try to shorten that gap, I suppose. When I emerged into the real world of filmmaking, I realised that the industry didn't really care that I'd done incredibly well with my degree, and I wondered why not. And when I came back into it, I wanted it to be as relevant as possible for the next generation, and I feel that the future technologies that we now work with really help with that. The kind of brave new world of virtual production and immersive technologies are really something that the industry and the academies can journey on together, and I'm interested in how that all fits together. Raza.
Thank you. Well, essentially, I think I'm here because I love filmmaking and cinema. But what I do now in the University of Greenwich, that one part of the job is that I work in the Faculty of Liberal Arts and Sciences and in the Institute of Inclusive Communities, where I work with different research projects. But like the second part of the job is that I am researching on how we can integrate technology, particularly like this virtual production one, beyond just filmmaking, beyond just its traditional uses, and then how we can bring it into other art forms, into the classroom, while we have live audiences and we can simultaneously film it. So that's my...
Fantastic. And also to mention this beautiful wall and setup that we have here is with our partners and our team here at Nightsky Studios, who are in Glasgow, who we work with quite often on training. We also go in and work with universities, and I think what I'd like to know more is, you recently got a wall, a volume in your own studio, and I'm quite interested in the journey that you have seen, particularly since you've been there for a few years before there was a wall, and now all the kit and everything, and how that has changed the way in which you teach students or their perception of that technology. Do you think it's harder, easier? Just sort of tell us what you think the benefits are from your vantage point, and maybe what some of those challenges for the future might be.
So let's start with the challenges, I suppose. Let's start with the journey to getting the wall. So we went up for a large AHRC bid, and as part of that, the different sort of departments within the school looked into what technological investments might best suit the way they wanted to travel. And it seemed like a no-brainer to me at the time. It was obvious that we were around COVID, and COVID was a great accelerator for virtual production. So it felt like if we were going to spend significant money, it needed to be future-facing, and virtual production seemed to be the way that things were going, and so therefore the best game in town in terms of what we could do. But as soon as you come to start to plan and make those decisions, the big thing you're up against really initially is space and how you're going to use it, because you're in a very unusual position if you're opening up a new space or developing a new space simply to put a wall into it. And the nature of university life is that all the spaces that you've got are already used to capacity, and yet there you are trying to carve out a new world and a new way of using that same space. So that was challenging in the first instance. We were lucky because we'd been on the journey of developing our green screen offering. My perfect world is that we had green screen and therefore hybrid capture in one studio and the volume LED in the other studio, gallery above, and either one could be operated according to and still be used in a traditional filmmaking format in the same way. There was some pushback, as there often is, and we ended up with both of those things in the same space. And so the challenge was then how to make that work. You deal with those things as they happen day by day, and then the big step from that was how is this actually going to be used and who's going to use it. So the award was won on the basis of research outputs. So the first responsibility has to be to the research. But you can't put a 5x3 metre, £300,000 wall into a room that's full of students and expect students not to be interested in using it. So then it quickly becomes a relationship between what do we do for the research, give that a primacy, but also how do we then bring that on board into the curriculum. And I suppose what's happened is that you look to the opportunities in your existing curriculum and how to develop them, and that starts to present the opportunities, and that starts to develop the way that you use it and refine your workflows. And then at the same time, other people creatively within the school and the wider area see it and find their own ways to use it, and that develops the conversation, and that starts to help shape the direction of travel in terms of the research. And we've been very lucky, partly geographically and partly because, well, you know yourself, we're lucky to be developing relationships with a number of industry providers, and that really helpfully informs how we understand what we're doing and what we can do and what that research might look like, whilst still keeping it relevant to industry practice and what students do as well.
Do you want to speak a little bit to that research factor of the wall? Yeah?
So maybe from the research element of it is that initially I think that I think I might start from saying that for the universities, one of the challenges would be that how that resource. So let's imagine that most of the universities are resource starved in a way, and there's a decision you have to make when it comes to space, and so you're sharing space between teaching and research, and in that there are markers for universities you have to hit or you have to aim for, which are just compulsory. So KEF, knowledge exchange, and what is university's impact. In that, what model we have realized kind of at this point, which is still in flux, which is that maybe at the level of research and R&D at the cutting edge, it is better to have these resources centered in an overarching bodies and not actually divide them that much, so that a body can understand that, okay, well, no, we do need research and teaching, and how can we then manage it as one rather than think of it as and have a competition. So we have created this hub, which is we call SHIFT. Essentially, it's an acronym, Shared Hub for Immersive Future Technologies. And I think from that is where my research kind of started, and universities started to understand that, okay, well, it's not just about like teaching classes, it could be something which university can become leader into, where how can we then use this space and then bring it to explore the future of virtual classrooms or virtual tutors in physical classroom. But yeah, so I think this is the overarching point from now. Yeah.
I see some overlapping themes here emerging, and it is with the converging technology. We talk about the space. You need a space that is multifunctional, right? And it's also about teaching the students to be generalist, or to be able to have some sort of understanding of how technology works across different mediums and also different use cases. So you need the facilities to be able to demonstrate all that. And then also this collaboration between research and teaching to help inform that pedagogical change. But then also the industry comes in to help spur what's needed so that curriculum stays updated. And we all know it's quite difficult for education and universities to keep up to date with the curriculum changes, and particularly in the fast-paced world of virtual production and real-time technology. So I'm curious, how do you, as faculty teaching, how do you manage all of this new information that's coming in, your own CPD? Is this something that the university provides, training and ongoing? Because the students obviously are having the latest and greatest because they're on TikTok and YouTube. How do you manage that for your own trajectory?
Well, I don't think it's attitudinal, basically. Like, for me, it kind of comes naturally, because the best way to consider all of this stuff is that it's a tool. So it's about what you're going to do with it. So then, as with most tools, and I come from obviously a filmmaking background, very camera-centric, I'm a cinematographer, what you're looking to do is, like, what do I need to try to tell the story that I want to tell? And in the end, that's how you get involved in it. And then you start to interrogate that process. And that was the same. Green screen was the thing prior to virtual production or hybrid virtual production, so you still needed to have an understanding of virtual VFX in order to know how you did your green screen capture. The same questions were basically being asked, and they were being asked for the same reasons. It's just now that the answers have changed slightly. So for me, it's a sort of due diligence to understand how the technology works and then how you're going to implement it. And then if you're coming from a place of understanding how you can generate ideas and then use these things as a tool to support your creative outcomes, it becomes a lot more plugged in, and then it becomes a lot easier to plug students into it. And what's always interesting now is that if you start to onboard people into the creative opportunities in the way that Raza talks about it, or in the way that I might talk about it, or a way that a low-budget commercial filmmaker might talk about it, which is always interesting, I think, in the case of virtual production, because it's very easy to talk about the big-budget examples, right? But what you need to talk about, because the university sits alongside it, is how do you do it with a limited budget and fast turnaround? How can you still make valuable, interesting, creative decisions in these spaces, and how does that work? And then once people understand how you can approach that and what you can do with that, you start asking the questions of what you want to do with it, and before you know it, you're in the space and you're doing it. And that then starts to shape the curriculum. You're absolutely right, in as much as changing curriculum is a really slow-moving thing in terms of university life, but you can still coax it along month by month, year by year, and you can do it in step with your own learning and development. And it's probably good to do it that way rather than to try to do it in a prescriptive way, because that way you are going to come out of it with outcomes that are specific to you, your creatives, your students and your institution. And then that's sort of future-proofing itself, because you've chosen that intellectual direction of travel, and you'll get best use out of the equipment accordingly.
Before I ask you about your TEDx project, we talk about community, right? We talk about industry and education working together to solve those challenges much faster than working in silos. So you do a project using the virtual production technology in your TEDx program. Can you talk a little bit about what that journey's been like? Because you've delivered two years of it, right? So it's probably been quite a journey from the first year of implementing it to the second year, and the things that you've learned. And you also have some research now that is helping to inform the direction of travel. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
So we started just coincidentally because we had industry partners working with the university, and the students who were working with Peter were actually going to the industry, and they were doing various different internships over there, and so they were very familiar with what kind of technology it is, and then how. I think that is the most important point, that they were so aware by working with the industry that they were thinking, where else can we implement it? And so our conversation with those students brought in this idea that, okay, why not we introduce virtual production, well, volume LEDs in TEDx event where set matters the most, in a way that if you want to tell a good story on a stage, because it is essentially a stage performance, the TEDx, you want to build a very good set which complements the speaker's ideas. And what a better way to enhance storytelling in that kind of format by using a virtual production setup. But at that time, we went for the first event, we went for hybrid, where there was, well, with the green screen and then showing it on a TV rather than a volume LED wall. And from there, we realized that, well, it doesn't really work for the live audiences because they still see the green screen and they see the TV, yes, they see the result, but they are kind of distracted, and you don't want that. And so then from there on, our conversation began with me, Peter, and one of our other colleagues, Jean, that how can we have an event where live audiences, so you see this setup, and this technology is built for what is in front of the camera, but not really what is behind the camera, or who is behind the camera. So we were thinking that how can we have live audiences, which matters to us and TED a lot, and their experience is also as immersive as the experience of viewers watching the video after the fact. And so how do you do that simultaneously? And that was the question which actually helped us to talk to various different industry partners. So I think, Peter, I would like you to talk around it, like how you saw it, but from that onward, I think everyone saw it a little differently. And I think that was a very interesting aspect of it. Like, of course, if you're talking to engineers, they were like, well, this is not what it's built for. And then you're like, well, sure, technologies are built for a specific purpose, but then you look at it and you can evolve it for different things. And if you're interested in filming it in a way, then it means something else. But if some people were more interested in the live audiences, and for them it was different. And in a way, for me, it was that how can we use the technology which is least distractive, gives the most amount of immersion, but also is sustainable and easily somehow transferable, this knowledge. And that is how we wanted to record all these steps. And we are writing the paper, and we're going to publish it with our industry partners and the engineers who wrote it. So that's somehow from my side, overarching view. But Peter.
Yeah, I was always interested in it in terms of how it worked, I suppose, as a performance space in terms of a filmmaking perspective, because it's interesting, the sort of TEDx concept. It's not wildly different to this in as much as it's about you being in the room doing the thing, but actually what it's about is the output, where it's captured and then the amount of people who then watch it. So it transcends from being an event to becoming a video, and ultimately that's its value, I suppose. And we did 3. And the first one, when we got together and started working on it, the remit was to let's do something cinematic. So to break away from the kind of traditional event capture of someone just standing on a stage, and how do we do more with that? And so I had lots of, like, as you'd expect, ideas about how we move the camera and capture the performance and amplify those sort of filmic elements, right? So we had high-end cameras, we had moving cameras, we tried to encourage the performance to walk around, to inhabit the space, to be more dynamic. And inherent in that were the challenges of those performances, because these people are here because of what's inside their head and not because of how they move around and inhabit a stage and how they captivate in that way. But it was a success in and of itself. And so the next step, which was the first step into the hybrid, into the virtual production, seemed like the next step on that journey. So as we were still swinging cameras around, but we had the composite image, and we did our best to allow the viewers to see the tech as we were capturing it, but also to see the final result on big screens. But the feedback was astonishing to me, which is that all of this is way too distracting. Like, we don't want to see it. Because obviously if you're watching it as the audience on your screen at home, you're not seeing that. You're just seeing the finished piece. But TED, quite rightly, are really interested in the audience experience as it's happening to the live audience. They're like the crucible audience, the most important people that you're talking to. And the feedback was, it's all very well, but it's just too much. So the next step onward from that was, let's try and do it with a volume, and let's see what happens with that. Same sort of similar approach to the cinematography, which is try to have moving cameras, try to keep it dynamic, try to make more happen. But the thing that I was really interested in is, we're all in a world now where we take PowerPoint presentation for granted, right? In fact, it's become boring. People want more from it. They're tired of seeing. We hear students all the time saying there's too much PowerPoint. Not from me, obviously, but you know, generally they want something else. And so it seemed to me that what you want is the interaction between this and this, right? And that's what you do with a PowerPoint. Just press your button, you click, this is my side, I'm going to gesture to it, I'm going to talk more about this. And if you could actually cue in the story, create the space, create a space that's relevant to the story that you're telling, you can actually make, it becomes a lot more performative. It becomes almost like a magic act where you can launch something, you can make something happen, you can inhabit the space and do something different. But obviously, there's always the distance between your ambition and then the reality, and we only got a small distance towards the overall ambition for all sorts of valid reasons, but it still proved that the idea was solid and sound, and in the end what you're discussing after that are the economics of it. And what was interesting as well is that, as Raza leans towards, is that it confounded the idea of how virtual production works because it's so camera-centric in its imagination. But what I'm interested in when you consider these technologies is that ultimately there are four spaces. There's the space which is the camera capture, there's the space which is the space that we're in, the theatrical space, there's the space which is the screen itself, the physical screen, and there's the space which is the space that you create within the screen. And the better you can blend all of those four spaces together, the more magical it feels, right? And that's true for filmmaking, but perhaps it can also be true for these kind of events that we're talking about. And there was a time when PowerPoint came out when that was new and exciting and different and people hadn't seen it. And for me, it feels like VP in this iteration could be the next vanguard.
And that innovation curve as well, it was like 20 years, I think, before PowerPoint became, you know, a steady, hopefully we'll be able to reach that much faster. I think one of the things that's really keen and themes that are underlying is this idea of community. People are expecting a more immersive experience, the user experiences. They want the tech to be able to help make that happen, but they don't necessarily want to see it, right? Which is a trick. This requires skills. This requires a lot of multiple roles working together, being able to communicate with each other. We quite often say in virtual production, it's not just about the hard skills that you need to know, but it's also the soft skills and how teams communicate, because now you're bringing in all this new technology, new roles into virtual production. And I'm wondering how the students' perception of this new world, particularly since universities are typically quite siloed in their departments, and now you're bringing in games and computer science and obviously film and performance. Your university is now a different department in terms of how those things get merged together. Students have very loud voices and are wanting this technology and wanting to push the boundaries of this. And I'm just curious how you guys embrace all of that to make that community become a more inclusive place for this innovation to happen between that partnership of research and development. Do you want to go first?
Yeah, well, I think what's interesting is that if you think about what universities, particularly the way that we manifest it in terms of the technology and the creative, what they're there for, is that you're there to create the space and the resources and the room for students to sort of take flight, I suppose, in terms of what their ambitions are. And it's interesting with any of the technology, and I suppose any of the learning, that as a student, you don't know what you don't know, but you can't, so you just sort of reach towards things. And that's the voyage, isn't it? That sort of level of interest, the journey that you want to go on. So I think what's nice is that very few students at this point, and very few colleagues actually, are prescriptive about what this thing is. Oh no, it has to do this, I definitely want it to do that. And that makes it an open space. You know, everybody's looking to have best case examples of how it's been used and to try to develop it and let it find its way. And those are small steps. So the first time I used it on a master's course last year for the first time, and I wrote up what I wanted the output to be in the assignment. And of course, as part of that, I wrote must demonstrate camera tracking, right? Which seemed like an obvious thing to say in terms of virtual production, right? The star tracker system, moving the camera to show the parallax shift in the virtual environment behind. But of course, master students reading that, they just read camera tracking. So the output turned into, instead of it being 3D outputs, which is what I was aiming towards, a lot of 2D outputs and a lot of camera tracking on 2D outputs, which is a different thing, obviously. It doesn't reach towards the same thing. But then what was interesting is that they still made cool stuff like that. So they lent into the technology, they created worlds that they wouldn't otherwise have created. In the best case examples, they understood that you need to do the link between the real space and the virtual space to bring you into it, to make it immersive. So it was a sort of an unintentional win, if you like. You could still show that and go, look, we did this in this space and it's great student work, even though on a level it didn't reach as high. But that objective is still out there and it'll happen in its own way, I suppose.
Yeah, so I think I'll just do a quick, like a timeline of what I saw and how this got integrated. So I'm planning to do TEDx event, and I walk into the Target 3D studio space where there's a curved screen, empty. The lights were reflecting on the floor, so it looks like that the floor was part of the screen. It was a video game, Unreal Engine dynamic environment, which was some sort of an old 11th, 12th century, like a mythical, churchish, yeah, something like that. I was thinking, wow, this feels like a cathedral. Now that's a loaded word, but I mean, whatever is your cathedral, you know, whatever you feel mesmerized or awe. And I felt that this is something we can transport, or this is something we can make other people experience. So how do we do that? But you can't do that when you have all these cameras and so many people and running around. So there is a way to do it, and this is what we wanted to find out. So we did try various different methods, and we will write like a detailed paper around it, like what we did with the frustum, what we did with the brightness levels, where we put the seats, frame rates, what methods could be used to make that more smoother. And then people came because they were interested in this technology, and they were of course interested in how it's been used in TEDx event. We asked them a questionnaire, ethics approved, and then we found out that they were not distracted. They found it actually very helpful and more engaging, that the speakers, what they were saying, were actually enhanced. So the storytelling was in a way enhanced through those dynamic environments which were separate for every speaker, which you cannot do traditionally. You can't just shift your set between breaks between one speaker to another speaker. And from that onwards, I think there are, what like a vision in a way, if we can share it here, is that you can have, for teachers, let's say in classroom, text to video generated environments with a minimum amount of editing in Unreal Engine, popping them onto the screen, using mocap sensors with your hands, as we were saying, PowerPoint presentation, changing it on the cue, and that could be much more smoother. And the funding bodies or AHRC are interested in this. So there is a way to make this more sustainable and circular, and through that engage local artists, which can then feed into it. So then you also have the community engagement. You can have that for theater performances. Now this is a very interesting element which I realized, that for theater performances there are many ways you can develop sets which can change. Not only they can change, you can have separations, you can have cameras pointing to different actors and the backgrounds. The video you will get out of it would be like a different type of a product. Like the NT Live theater show we see, they're interesting, but I mean, you know, they're not as engaging as the theater performance, but you can create a different type of product by having live performances and filming it through VP, and then having that on streaming platform, which might help, you know, bringing more people into theater. So this is like where we are going, and it is soundly backed up by our research methodology, and we are very serious to really find out, to not trick anything, but actually find out how can we really use the maximum potential of this technology, which is non-distractive and essentially is somewhat hidden and becomes part of that room, where hopefully at some point we can have the community gathering and some sort of a, ritualistic, artistic community performance. So it's like not only just pragmatic, utility-driven elements, we can maybe use it into a place where it's artistic and creating more bonds. So this is like the vision in a sense.
So on that cutting edge note, pushing the boundaries of your students to ask them to do things and outputs being slightly different, new technology, finding smoother, better, faster ways to do it. Let's talk briefly about AI. Have you guys started digging into AI? Are you using this in your teaching? Are students using it in any of their investigative research? What about, in terms of finding new methodologies to enhance the technology that you got to make it, bend it to your will, I suppose? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, AI. It's a confusing space, I think, at the university, because most of the challenges around AI come from a notion of plagiarism, of a lack of creativity in writing and how to be able to manage those things, the textual side of it. Whereas you could argue that spell check is AI. Some students do use spell check in fancy AI systems, and then that looks like a plagiarized document. So AI is very broad, and it's more interesting, I suppose, in terms of this conversation when you look at it in terms of the generative power that it's got. We're at the very beginning of sort of integrating or understanding how we might integrate that, I think. I don't think there's a sort of a wariness around it, I suppose. There's a sort of a mistrust. The best thing I heard about AI was somebody just said, instead of the letter A, which is artificial, you might as well just use the word pineapple, because it's the best way of understanding it as an intelligence. Don't try to look at it as a comparative intelligence to our own intelligence. Just look at it as a different version of intelligence. And I think that's much more helpful in terms of thinking about what its place might be and what it can do to serve, and what that actually looks like. We all see amazing examples that, that's that story of, I can't remember the name of the guy, but he was about to invest in 3 huge studios in the States, $750 million or something, and then he saw that Sona, the Japanese video generative one, and basically said, that's the future, I'm not going to build studios anymore. And that's his choice, but that to me equally seems quite reductive. I think AI will just be another tool. It will be an enhancement. I think it will threaten a lot of the sort of menial level of things, but ultimately you'll still need human creativity, you'll still need humans, you'll still need... It's what interests us, it's what we're fascinated by, and also the level of, myself excluded, but you two are excellent examples of what intelligence actually means, and I pity any machine that's got to try to keep up with it, right?
Yeah. So, in my research, I'm trying to understand what kind of scenarios which we should avoid, so catastrophic risks and existential risks, so we can integrate methods which hopefully will make us wiser. But I will try to keep AI particularly to this element, because my research into artificial intelligence, which essentially is a pop word, essentially it is machine learning, but artificial intelligence is a popular word now. That's what we call it, so we'll call it that. I'll try to be a bit more general and then bring it here, because I have been working with social interaction of this kind of intelligence for quite a long time. So what type of AI are we using? So is it deep neural network? Is it neural network? Is it language learning models? That matters in a way if you are teaching and trying to integrate things at that level. So I think part of what my research is to introduce these concepts and try to show that how we have built these things, so that practitioners or teachers are aware of, okay, yeah, well, this company is using this method. Probably we want to. It's okay to integrate it in that way. So there is that element. Second, Stuart Russell is one of the leading AI researchers or machine intelligence, and we haven't yet created intelligence, not at all. I know that it looks very scary, and it is scary. It's because it is not a true intelligence. It's a mimicry of intelligence. So it is coming from a lot of his work, and it's not truly yet generating its own content. It's retraining on whatever content is available. It might start to create synthetic data, but that would also be problematic in a way. So now come back to just the narrow use of it, which is essentially the issue is that that we can create mimicry systems which can mimic intelligence in narrow intelligence models, which could create a lot of automation, and that can lock our creativity into those systems. So it's like the example would be, instead of a dog wiggling the tail starts to wiggle the dog. The tools will become so powerful, which it already are becoming, that they would define the vision rather than we defining the vision and using the tools as to get there. And so that, I think, is an important thing we really need to consider when we want to engage in this interaction. Understand the power of these tools, understand how they are built. Also, generative tool AI models are fantastic in a way that, yes, it can make many people enable to create things which they might not ever be able to create. And yeah, text to video is fantastic in that sense. But how we are going to integrate it, actually, it's part of the research. And I think that is an open question. And it's one of the most exciting questions, I think, of this time. And yeah, I mean, yes, I am working on it. We are working on it. So there isn't anything particular yet we can say.
That's fascinating and terrifying at the same time, because the thing that you said about the tail wagging the dog and AI then determining what's truth. I mean, that's what we're talking about. What's real and what's not real, and you think about the future generations who are going to be growing up on AI. We've been passing oral history down for thousands and thousands of years. How does that history then get translated when all of us are now gone and it's just people who have grown up on AI? It's an existential, question. But and the robots are around here somewhere.
They disappeared as soon as you said AI.
They did. They disappeared. So final question is, I think given all this, I think it's a really exciting time. I see it quite often, people going, it's so exciting to be alive, which is great. And the technology is fun. And, but I want to know kind of, where do you see your role, the university, the students, the greater community that you're trying to build? Where do you hope maybe and foresee it going in the future, say 2 years, 5 years down the road?
Well, this takes us back to the beginning, really, which is the question about the relationship between the academy and industry. And I just think that if you look at how the direction of travel for academies in the last 10 to 15, maybe 20 years, is they have to pay for themselves. They have to make sense of what their position is. They no longer can just have a position of being the kind of thought center of any community. They need to be more broadly relevant in the community. And I think that what's exciting about these technologies and where we sit with it is that this is one of the obvious opportunities to bring those two things closer together. So the industry can help shape the students that it wants and needs, and those students are much closer to being what the industry wants at point of arrival, if you see what I mean. So when I came out of university, the kit that you used was distinctly student kit, right? And then you moved into the industry and you moved up towards using top-end kit. Now at the University of Greenwich, we've got industry standard high-end cameras that they can get their hands on, that they can work with. And the same with having a volume and all of those kind of things. And so then, again, we're very fortunate because of our geography and our skill sets that we have great industry relationships. It's just a case of trying to bring those things together in a shared interest that isn't a conflict of interest. So that requires a level of compromise by the academy to give the industry its stated needs, and also a level of understanding from the industry of what the positive role that the academy can play. And I think that's really exciting for everybody.
Yeah, I think future of the university would be somewhat very different, and it would still be a university, but I think the role would evolve, and it can evolve. I mean, it's just my intuition, so I don't know. but and who can predict future. So it would be still a complex, dissipative, vibrant centers, but the role needs to evolve. It needs to become a community and a center in a way which could be a learning space where we can create certain ideas and actually use it as a learning center rather than a structure, which is a little bit of a difference now. I imagine that's how it started, but now we have like hyper specialized structures, and that's a problem that creates silos. And I think this is why I'm interested in the virtual production technology instead of any kind of glasses at this point. Biologically, there is an issue at this point where many people experience nausea and vertigo, and you cannot have glasses more than like 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, depending on the people. And we are working on it, and maybe we might solve it, but it's here right now. That we can do it right now. You can have that immersive experience right now. And guess what? You are not separated from the people around you. Like I'm sitting in a class, you know, circled by this screen. I can look at you, and I can connect, the experience I'm having onto the screen. Yeah, exactly. And so that experience is an experience which in research suggests creates more, again, it's a very preliminary finding, so I'm not gonna like say that this is the thing what happens, but it hints towards more emotional grounding, which is what we need now, particularly in the torrent of current of information we have are all around us. And so I imagine combination of these two, evolving what university is, technologies which are built toward community and ritualistic settings, hopefully can get us to a place where we can make sense and connect and have more innovation.
Yeah, I just wanted to add finally that as an extension of that thought is that the thing that the university can do and these technologies can do as well, which seems sort of inevitable and hopefully will prove to be, is that the sense of community broadens out. So you lose that us and them between the university and everyone else, right? And so that it isn't just like the natural sort of considered youth student progression through university, but it can actually provide resources and a community sense for everybody, you know?
I think there's also a lot of value in what comes next after the students graduate, but because you're now a center of learning, you have the technology and the kit that the students are able to still rally around, still be able to communicate, collaborate, work with industry partners. They have a space to come and explore and innovate, because as you know, when you get out in the industry, all that exploration stops. It's budgets, schedules, be on time, deliver what you need to deliver, and you cannot make a mistake or you'll be fired. Whereas in the Learning Center, you get an opportunity to explore and to fail. So this is fascinating. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate your thoughts and ideas. And I look forward to seeing what's next. Great. Thank you.